Hello, my name is M.W.Burnette. I am a home studio songwriter. Hello, my name is M.W.Burnette. I am an independent songwriter, home studio music producer, and recording artist, and this is my video diary. Today I want to talk about an issue that the church really spends a lot of its time and energy talking about. And that issue is sexuality, and in particular, homosexuality. I believe that the church in general has an unhealthy fixation on sexuality as a sin and elevates it as a sin above all other sins. Sexuality, the sexual sins are kind of in a special category separate from everything else. It's not just like greed and gluttony and lying and all of those sort of things. Sexual sins is a whole other thing. And I don't think that Christ or the Bible supports that sort of opinion of sexuality and sexual sins. I think that has a whole lot more to do with our puritanical heritage more than it does any kind of inspiration from God or any kind of theological reasoning. I remember myself as I was going through puberty and dealing with those unfamiliar feelings, these new feelings and temptations and desires and whatnot. And growing up in the church, I was always taught that having sex outside of marriage and lust and these different kind of sexual sins, topics, whatnot, that they were really, really, really bad. And so as I was feeling those kind of new feelings within myself, it was really frightening. And I remember, being young and late into the night, kneeling beside my bed and praying to God, I'm so sorry for feeling this way, for what's inside me. Please forgive me. Please take this away. Fix me. And this is me growing up in the church as a cisgendered heterosexual man. And I was feeling that way. So I can only imagine the kind of pressure that a person who was homosexual growing up in that environment must have felt. It hurts me to think what their experience must have been like. I've heard different preachers make the argument that, well, if you're homosexual, your feelings and your temptations, that's not what's sinful. What's sinful is acting upon them. Okay, well, let's dig into that a little bit deeper. So what you're essentially telling a person who's homosexual is it's okay, God still loves you and whatnot, just as long as you don't act on any of these temptations. You're saying to that person that all of the other romantic experience that heterosexual people in the church are able to have, that's off limits to you since you're homosexual. So things like experiencing your first kiss, or falling in love for the first time, going to your senior prom, getting married, having children, just having someone to spend your life with. Those things are off limits. If you're a homosexual, you are confined to a life of solitude. Otherwise, you will be in violation of God's law. Now, if that was the choice that that your church put to you and said, this is the life you have to live, otherwise you will be at odds with God. For God to accept you, this is the life you have to live. How many of us could accept that? I don't know if I could. I can see a few different responses. One is, you might say, well, there's nothing I can do about this. This is who I am. And if I'm going to be condemned for it for all of eternity, well, at least the time that I'm on earth, I might as well make the best of it. And so I'm not going to waste my time at church being told that I'm going to hell. I already know that. So I'm going to get as close to heaven as I can while I'm here. Or maybe you take another tack and you say, the longer that I stay on this earth, all I'm doing is just racking up a longer list of sins. And so the best thing that I can do is just end my life so that I'm not any more guilty when I do have to face judgment. If you're working in that particular theological context. And we know that plenty of homosexual people in the church have made exactly those decisions. It's not hard to understand why a person who is homosexual would turn their back on the church and turn their back on God and just assume that God hated them. And so I think that the church's hyper-focus on sexuality causes a lot of harm, not just for homosexuals. I think it causes harm for all of us, but for homosexual people and non-binary, transgender people with those type of traits. The church is often a very unwelcoming place from them, and I can't see Jesus reflected in that type of position. I have a hard time thinking that God's plan and his design for his church was to present people with those kind of dilemmas, where they have to choose a life of loneliness and misery or be at odds with God and condemned. I think that has a whole lot more to do with kind of our own cultural identity and our tendency to want to separate ourselves into us versus them and say we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. We have a tendency to want to point at somebody else who's different than we are and say they're the bad guys because they're different from us. And I feel like there are numerous examples throughout Jesus' ministry and throughout the New Testament in general contradicting that perspective. So I think that what we need to do is really try to show some empathy for people who are different than we are, and try to focus our attention less on trying to point out sin in someone else's life, because that's not our responsibility. We aren't responsible for the consequences of someone else's choice. Each one of us is a moral agent. All of us have to decide in our own lives what actions we're going to take. And we have to make those decisions. Is this moral? Is this immoral? Is this sin? Is it not? And, we can kind of help each other to make those decisions, but we can't impose our point of view on someone else and hold them accountable to our standards. That's just not authority that we have. They aren't beholden to us. So I think we need to give people the freedom to make those decisions for themselves. And our responsibility in this equation is just to love and accept other people, to show charity and generosity, to be our brother's keeper. So I think that's what we need to spend our energy on: love, acceptance, welcoming other people rather than dividing the world into us versus them. So that's all I've got for right now. Thank you for your attention, and we'll see you next time. Stay groovy.